Nelson here with the Real Leverage Podcast, yet another episode. And I'm joined with a good friend out of the Dallas, Texas market. Matt, welcome to the show, man.
What's up, buddy? Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So, man, I'm excited. I think I was on your guys' show, which, by the way, I want you to do a big intro into that. You guys have been hella consistent with your guys' show, and have built a massive audience that I would love for people that don't know about your show to be able to jump on and listen to. So tell me a little bit, man. I know you're obviously in real estate. We'll jump into that. And tell me about the podcast you guys run before we kind of get started here.
Yeah, man, we've got a kind of an entrepreneurial with a real estate flavor podcast. It's obviously real estate oriented because myself, Nick Good, and Brian Force, the guys I do the podcast with, we're all in real estate, so it's what we talk about. But I think anybody who's looking to get a mindset change around what they need to do entrepreneurially, or if you're just a real estate agent who wants to listen to three guys chop it up about kind of the actual ass kickings they take on a regular basis, it's perfect for that as well, man. We started doing it in the garage kind of over a couple of beers, and I think we just did our 78th for real professional show. That's not including probably the 30 garbage ones we did before that. So we're creeping up on 100 episodes of really doing it for real. It's been pretty awesome.
I love that, man. And did you say the name of the show?
I didn't. I'm so bad at plugging this stuff. We're still so whatever. It is very tongue-in-cheek. It's called The Only Real Estate Podcast Worth Listening To. So, and of course we realize it's not, but it's hilarious. And we think the name pisses off people, which we think is funny. So we just roll with it.
I love it. Whenever we were coming up with the Real Leverage Podcast name, we were trying to figure out a way to top the amount of words you guys had in your podcast, but we weren't quite able to do so. So tell us, Matt, we're going to dive into, obviously, on the Real Leverage. We talk everything leverage, whether it's admin leverage, VA leverage, people that run big teams and how they leverage their teams. I'd love to hear a little bit of your background. Obviously, you and I were at the same company for a long time, and you guys are one of the most well-known teams across the country. So I'd love to just learn a little bit more about your journey and kind of what led you to where you're at now.
So I don't really have a title, but we'll call me the lead agent for Adam Hergenrother's expansion in DFW. So if you're familiar with KW's model, it's, there's large expansion teams, and we're the fourth largest expansion inside KW. I think that puts us fourth or fifth on the planet, right? So it's a big organization, and I was a decent agent before that. I was doing the 3 deals a month they tell you need to do, and I was, on paper making some decent amount of money, but I was, just terribly inefficient inside my business. I'd attempt to hire some assistants prior to that. I hired a friend, then I hired a virtual assistant, then I hired another friend, right? And it kind of failed at putting leverage in place. And then moved over to KW and found a couple of leverage points that were built in that were really nice. And then ultimately about 2.5 years ago, partnered with her group, which added a ton of leverage in my world. And then ultimately partnered with Brian Force, one of the 3 guys we do the podcast with. And that completely changed everything. Because one of the things, for sure, I'm sure we'll get into, is just his ability to automate and do certain things adds so much leverage into my world. So my journey is kind of a little bit about not just going from individual agent to team agent, but also being in partnership with somebody who knows the types of systems I need and has the ability to put them in place. That's been a game changer for me.
I love that. So tell me a little bit. A lot of people listening are obviously big into the expansion world. They're in expansion themselves. Some of us don't even know what expansion is, listening. So tell me a little bit, what's your story? How did you hear about expansion, and what made you take the jump? Because obviously myself, as someone that's helped expand teams before, a lot of agents just don't even know what it is, and they think that it's just an organization out to take all of your money, right? They just want all my money. They don't want to make me money. So tell us a little bit about what was your journey, and how did you even find an expansion organization, and what made you go, wow, that actually sounds great?
Some of it, and I think you have to almost work backwards through the story to understand some of it. Towards the end of 2017, I was on paper making a bunch of money, but I was fairly broke, right? I was selling a lot of real estate, and my numbers looked decent, but there was zero joy in it. The entrepreneurial part of real estate was just completely kicking the hell out of me. I just had no ability to really grow past wherever I was at. And my personal life was a wreck. My marriage was towards the end of its run. So the way I was doing it, just to grind it out, because I got that deep into real estate just by outworking everybody. I was willing to take a deal that was 2 hours away. I didn't like, it just didn't matter. That doesn't work when you start pushing real units, right? Like you can't have that kind of business that's just all over the place. So, Hurricane Harvey had happened down in Houston, and KW does like a mega relief or a mega camp every year. Well, that year they switched over to mega relief and went down, and everybody just kind of gave their time. And my team leader here was standing next to somebody online who was part of Adam Hergenrother's association, like her group. And they just started talking, do you have any agents who are individual agents looking to grow? And I tried to start a team a couple of times and just couldn't really figure out how to make all the pieces fit together. And so that conversation started, and then 2.5 years later, it's been amazing. But it really started as just, to bring it back to your original questions, expansion is kind of, I hate to say it's a franchise model because I think that makes it seem kind of like whatever. But the reality is Adam Hergenrother up in Vermont was essentially kind of hemmed in at some point by his geography. You're only going to sell so many houses in Vermont. But he was a badass real estate agent who had put together badass systems and also figured out a way to take those systems and potentially other people could use those systems. And as he started expanding out of his region, him and Ben Kinney and Chris Suarez and some of these other guys who have done this at a high level have just partnered with agents on the ground in other cities. And essentially you just kind of link up. And like I tell everybody, whether you're joining our team, a team at EXP, a team at Coldwell Banker, right? Like you should be evaluating the team as a structure, right? Look at it as a tower of systems that you can use to climb to whatever level of success you want. And then you have to determine whether or not what that tower entails, not just leads and leverage, but also knowledge and all those things that help you make real money. Are they worth whatever you're giving back to the team for their ability to actually build the system that you couldn't build on your own? Because that's not a zero cost thing either. So I just finally got to the point where, man, I was taking home 40% of what I was making because I was such a bad business owner. And I just didn't want to run that model anymore.
No, it makes total sense. And I think what you hit it on the head is you have to evaluate for yourself. And I think a lot of times people don't ever even get to the point of evaluation, right? They don't even ever go sit down with an expansion team or with a team leader or, and I'm not talking like switching brokerage to brokerage. I'm just talking about even within your own brokerage, right? There's a lot of opportunities that people won't even sit down and take a look at. I mean, I know for our team, we had so many agents that when I was on my dad's team at KW and I was his head expansion director, they wouldn't even take a look at expansion, and now they regret not joining his expansion team.
If you are being approached by people, and look, in real estate, I'm not talking about the lenders who want to take you to lunch or the title companies who want to like do whatever, right? Like I'm talking about like if you're being approached because of your production and you're not willing to sit down and have those conversations with people, you are incredibly arrogant and probably doomed for some level of failure. The fact that you wouldn't sit down with somebody else who is like-minded about business growth and pick their brains over a free lunch shows me that you're incredibly short-sighted as a business owner, right? So I'm always leery of agents who are like, I don't even want to talk about it. I'm not saying it's maybe not this week, but at some point, if you never have that conversation, then you're kind of just regurgitating somebody else's knowledge, honestly.
No, I love it, man. One of my good friends, Curtis Johnson, he always says that I wouldn't be worried about if you're being recruited. I wouldn't be worried about if you're not being recruited. Which is so true, and it kind of speaks to what you just said.
In real estate, we get all these calls from these security systems after we sell a house, right? Yep. And agents always, I don't know why my phone is blowing up. Agents always get like so irritated by those calls. I'm like, dude, it's because you're selling real estate. Like it's an okay problem to have. They don't call you if you're not selling houses.
I love it, man. I love it. So obviously a lot of people listening are always looking for nuggets around leverage. What would you say is the biggest piece of leverage that your expansion team has provided you? Obviously there's financial leverage, there's admin leverage, there's system leverage. What would you say is the biggest thing for you that you've been able to leverage out so far? So I always struggle to answer this question, not because I don't know the answer, but I feel like it's such a cop-out sometimes. I can't think of one piece. Like if you were to ask me one piece of leverage, Lady Force, my transaction coordinator and ops manager, is the single most indispensable piece of leverage that I have in my day-to-day life, right? The amount of hours she as an individual human takes off my plate, it's crazy. But if she is part of the larger part of leverage that is just time, right? Like at 41 years old and, my son's going to be 6 on Friday. For me, I am only looking for time back, right? I have great financial dreams and there's a lot of stuff I want to do, but I'm also hemmed in a little bit just by my personality because I'm not going to,
I don't need certain things, right? Like there's a level where I'm making a certain amount of dollars and I'm cool with that amount, right? But I think for me, being able to get time back is what it's allowed me to do because I can hand off all my transaction stuff to my transaction coordinator, because I can hand off all the all the generic real estate marketing, I can push all of that back in. Even little things like, you know, my favorite piece of leverage as a real estate agent, man, it's the ability to do something on the fly because I have so much anxiety and stress
Yeah.
just as a human in general. The ability, the thing I love doing the most, so my assistant's name is Danny. And my favorite thing to do is when something I would have used to have to do that would have slipped my mind, right? Like you and I are friends on Facebook. You've got stupid crap happening in your life all the time, right? So I have the same type of stuff. I forget things that are so obvious because I just carry yellow notepads around with me everywhere. And I just get lost in the mix of these yellow notepads, right? So my favorite thing to do is legitimately send Danny a text or a Facebook message or an email that just says, remind me on Friday to do this at 3 p.m. And then you know what I do? I don't worry about it again until 3 p.m. on Friday when Danny reminds me to do it. And I will tell you, there you get to a certain level of production or a certain level of just doing enough of your own crap to where it's little stuff like that feels amazing. At the end of every day, I don't have it right here because I've already done it, I think. He sends me a Google sheet that just says, here's your to-do list. I print it out and I just go through and just draw lines through the stuff once I do it. There's so much satisfaction that comes with the completion of the task. And I was dropping the ball so much because I was so overwhelmed that now sometimes just being able to get this thing off my list of stuff and put it on his list and make it his problem, that's one of the greatest pieces of leverage. And that gives me the most internal sense of relief over anything else.
Yeah, I love that. And you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but usually it's not the like pieces of the puzzle getting dropped that's client facing. It's usually all the back end stuff, right? And that's the stuff that we take home and, you know, it takes away from our family and kids. And
it gets intertwined, right? So like where my mistakes happen, and we're very honestly, I've lost tens of thousands of dollars as a business owner because people have just been like, I'm not going to work with you, dude.
Yeah.
It's entry level communication, right? I wow the hell out of them up front. I can follow up with them like crazy. But there's a point where everything's going fine and I know it's going fine to where I'm just very unconcerned about telling anybody else anything that's going on.
Yeah.
So I put so many systems in, right? Like Danny sends an email every Wednesday to all of my sellers that essentially it's the email that we all tell our clients that we're going to send them when we take the business that nobody ever ends up sending. And if you're a real estate agent, you're watching this, you know exactly the BS that I'm talking about.
Those Sunday night calls we're going to make.
Yeah, that nobody ever ends up doing, right? So like I've got all that automated now. It's very templated. Whenever I take a new listing, I set up like a comp or criteria area, and my assistant knows exactly what to send every Wednesday. And guess what else it's got? A little link to my Calendly. That if they actually want to talk about their listing, they can go sign up for a 15-minute slot. If they don't sign up for a slot, I'm assuming they didn't want to talk about their listing. Guess what? I'm not worried about it because the directions are very, very clear, right? So it's little pieces of leverage like that I haven't even really been able to explore too much, but they just remove balls being dropped, right? I don't know how it makes my life easier, but I know it makes my life less stressful because it's stuff that wasn't happening before.
Yeah, no, I love that. I honestly, I'm going to highlight that, pull that out here and chop it up. The part you just said about your Calendly, I love that. I mean, it's kind of the same way with our VA business. Like if someone says, hey, I want you on your calendar, I send them my calendar. If they don't get on my calendar, I just assume they no longer need me, right? Like if we don't have to worry about it, I don't stress that I forget to follow up with them or, you know, it's there.
Part of it is setting a proper expectation up front though. I tell my clients when we go under contract that we are now going to start having a lot more email communication. And if you're the type of person who's not read your emails, you are going to miss stuff. And that is not going to be my problem, right? Like I'm not going to send you a separate text message with the exact same instructions that lady just emailed you, right? Like at this point, I am still here. You can reach out to me whenever, but the reality is you don't want to hear from me right now because I hired lady specifically to do this part, right? And if she can't do it, that means she's either called me and told me you're being a pain in the ass and or there's a problem, right? Like, so there's a part of it too that's just training people up. And look, all of this is from breaking eggs. And I think to the podcast point or to the leverage point, all of these things have come from me losing money over it. You know, it's the same reason all these addendum and all these other contractual documents exist. Somebody got their faces sued off over that. and now there's a document to cover everybody else's butt. It's the same thing. I've lost money over certain things, so now I pay people to make sure I don't lose that money anymore.
I love that. I love that. Now, talk to me when you talk about losing money. Like, maybe I'm wrong here, but maybe you're like me. I've lost a lot of money from referrals. Like, referral gets sent my way. I know you do a lot of referral business, and I'm like on a showing or on a listing appointment or just out and about hanging with the family. I get a referral and I never get to follow up with it or I get to chase it down. Do you have any leverage in place for that now to kind of not forget about those?
I do. And we still find holes in it all the time, right? Like, so for instance, I take in a lot of referrals. So that business comes with two sets of expectations, right? I've got to appease the client like I would in any situation. And I've got an agent who 99% of the time did not know who I was prior to that referral going out. They haven't done business with me before, right? They also need to be informed in the process. And I take in so many that, look, I have referrals fall apart for all kinds of reasons. The person wasn't really a serious buyer or seller. Their money wasn't right. They were dicks, right? Like whatever it is, there's all these reasons why I wouldn't necessarily work with somebody. So having follow-up systems on the referral end from the point where they come in to the point where I make contact to where they go under contract to where we're at in the contract to the close. And then I do an extra thing at the end. I want the referring agent to go leave me a Google review and shoot me a video, because now I'm doubling down on my reviews and I'm building essentially what I'm currently building right now with something else that you turned me on to a while back was my referral side of my business. Now, if I can get those agent reviews, I can use that as a marketing thing to agents who don't know me as, I can gladly give it to this guy, because we all know as entrepreneurs how hard it is to get somebody to leave you a video review. You get a nice stable of video reviews, other people in the industry are gonna be like, damn, he must really be doing his crap, because he's only getting a video review for 1 of 10 of these, and he's got 15 reviews, which means he must do a ton of these things, right?
I'll be honest, man, I used to be like fancy into the copy. Like I thought like ClickFunnels and the copy, and I made all these fancy words that I convinced someone to use me. I'll be honest with you, you guys go look at my sites, it's just testimonials now. Literally, whenever I look back at like the courses I've bought or the people I've used for different services, they just have like 200 testimonials, 100 testimonials, and that's it. They don't have any copy. They don't have anything. It's because nothing's more powerful than a testimonial.
You do something really well though too, that like, just to give you a bit of kudos, is like on your, when I brought on my VA and I reached out to you, I was like, dude, I was just struggling to find some stuff to like have them, just point them in some kind of damn direction, because that's the other problem is when we typically bring somebody on, we're hiring them to do a job that we are fundamentally incapable of doing. And then we have to turn on and train them how to do said job, right? It's obviously impossible. So I reached out to you and I was like, because full disclosure on this podcast, other people in our business have used your VAs. I got my VA because we already had a badass VA and we essentially brought somebody on that she recommended. But I went right to you and was like, dude, I need a list of stuff for my VA to do because I don't even know what to do. That same list, I've sent that to 3 people who are just like, what would you have your assistant do? Not even a virtual assistant. Like, what would you have them do? I'm like, dude, here's a list of just, 90% of this isn't going to apply to your business specifically, but the 10% that does, if you really look at it and figure out all the ways that it works in there, there's so much stuff that could come off your plate almost immediately.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. And just to kind of a total random trick, someone taught me this on a call I just got off of a minute ago, and I actually implemented it in between calls. There's a website called Magnify, MAGNFI. Not sure if you ever used it or heard of it, but it allows you to input like up to 300 people and request a video testimonial. And what it does is it will send them an email, and all they gotta do is click record. It will pop open their camera, and it will capture them, and then it will suck it in. They don't even have to do anything to send it back.
See, that's genius, because the thing about that is I don't think people are opposed to doing it. People are definitely very uncomfortable with video, but I think if to your point, maybe even putting some decent copy in there, I'd be like, look, somebody told me this too, since we're kind of on this, and I think people can be helped by this. When you're doing these video testimonials, don't just go in and ask them to leave you a video testimonial. And I don't remember who I heard this from, and if you watch this, tag yourself, because I want to give you credit because it's a genius. But ask them the one thing that you did to make the process better, right? Or to make it easier. Because what inevitably ends up happening, if I just ask you, like Justin, if you just ask me what's one thing you've done to make my business easier, well, you've helped me with multiple things, right? Just like me as a real estate agent, just help these people get through their transaction. So they're going to have at least one thing on their mind. I'm going to be like, actually, dude, the information you gave me on LinkedIn was amazing. The information you gave me for my VA was amazing. I'm going to say 2 or 3 things because I'm like, you know what, Jason's actually helped me with like a bunch of shit.
I love
He's a
that.
great guy, right?
I love that.
I think that's, if you're looking for a prompting question to ask people, just be like, hey, look, I'd love for you just to record a 30-second video about one thing I made easier about this process for you. Right?
No, I love that. And you said the hesitation of video, like, especially with the Zoom world, I think a lot more people are getting used to, like, one thing, I actually trick my people into video reviews now. Like, I'll get on a Zoom call and I'll ask them a question similar to that, but I actually like yours better than what I even asked. And I'll be like, hey, Matt, how's that? You know, what's one thing in your business that's improved over the last 30 days or just something like that? And they'll answer it. And I'll go, oh, hey, by the way, I was recording today's call. Do you mind if I snap out a review out of that? And now it's like, they don't really
That's actually pretty genius.
Like, to be honest with you, full disclosure, I have 5 testimonials on my website right now that I should probably go and ask my clients if it's okay if they're on there, because they don't even know if they're on there.
Just to make sure you use their likeness. No, but here's the thing: is people will say nice things about you, aren't going to tell you no to that stuff. You know, you obviously address all the normal niceties and those types of things, but I don't think you're going to get a no for any of those. You don't get that opportunity in real estate too often where you're Zooming with people very much, so you don't get to swipe that way. Nick on our podcast, you know, he's with the same company you are from the real estate side, and he and his team do a really good job of getting video testimonials. I've been a little bit reluctant to ask for it. I'm a people pleaser by nature. I hate making people uncomfortable. In certain aspects of my life, other aspects I'll make incredibly uncomfortable. So, but I've struggled to ask for that. So I don't have as many as I should.
I love it. Well, one thing kind of just masterminding here that I, back in Colorado, I saw a really big agent do. They would ask the title company rep to ask for the video testimonial. So
that was a bit going around a couple of years ago. I saw a couple of people doing that a couple of years ago. And here's the thing is, I think that works super, super well. You're also kind of putting it in the hands a little bit of somebody who may be just as shy to ask for it as people are to do it. I think it works great. Like, for instance, I work with Heather Good at Lawyers Title all the time here locally. She'd do that for me in a heartbeat, and she'd be great at it because she's charismatic. But there's definitely been other title companies I've worked at is like, I don't need that square helping me out.
Yeah, that makes sense, man. That makes sense. So tell me, what were some of the first things that you kind of went through a little bit of the things they're doing? Like, what were some of the first things that you tried to get like leveraged off that you realized, you know what, I'm actually just going to hold on to those myself?
So I came from a bartending background. I was a bartender for 16 years. So that was the skill set I came into this with. So I recognized fairly early on that the people and relationship part of it was the one part I always needed to keep control over. So I didn't go through the normal kind of agent thought process of I need to leverage out like phone calls and relationship stuff. Like, I knew that was a terrible idea for me specifically. The very first thing I tried like automating or even hiring somebody for was marketing stuff, right? I didn't do any marketing. I came into real estate directly out of bartending. And if you've been in that industry, I had no sphere for my industry. None of those jokers were buying a house, right? Like, so I had to go out and grind. So at the time in 2012, the .com leads were still smoking, right? So I hopped on realtor.com. Got some zip codes that the price points were decent, and really kind of killed it with that for about 2.5 years. Now looking back on that, there was a lot of ways I could have used automation in there to have grown my business. At the time, I didn't have any clue what automation really existed. I mean, it was just crazy how little I knew about what I could have done. And maybe it didn't exist in 2014 the way it does now. But I look at it back then, I'm like, dude, if I would have had those 1,000 leads back then with the systems I have now, I would have closed so many of them over time. But so many of those leads just floated off into the abyss of me not having a clue what to do with them.
Yeah.
So the real first piece I tried to add was I hired a friend to kind of do all these ideas, right? I wanted to do keychains, and I wanted to do thank you cards and birthday cards, and I wanted all these, and it was overwhelming in my business. But the reality was it was really only about like 2 hours worth of work for somebody else, right? It was like, because I didn't have enough clients to really be sending out a ton of cards. I didn't really have enough information on past clients or anybody to be building anything up. So the first real effective piece of automation I had was transaction coordination. Like, from a leverage standpoint, that was the first thing I did really effectively that really gave me free time back. And I would say from a real estate perspective, I don't care what lie you tell yourself about how great you are at the transaction coordination or how much you need to be involved. If you understand the process from beginning to end and you understand the contract in your state, get out of the way. You are spending so much time. My ability right now, when somebody sends me an email and it's asking for the seller's proof that he did the AC repair, you know what I do? I forward that to my transaction coordinator, and it's their problem now. You know what I mean? I'm not worried about whether or not that seller has even done the work, much less whether or not we have the receipts. My transaction coordinator will let me know if there's a problem. She's now going to go look for those receipts. She's going to see if we have an email from her already. Chances are we do, because she asked for them earlier in the process because she knows what she's doing. She sends those along to the agent. Here's the thing is, we as real estate agents, we think about those types of things and we're like, well, I don't really, that email doesn't take up that much time. It doesn't take up that much time because you're not closing that many deals. It starts to take up a ton of time when you start closing a ton of deals. When you start having more on the board, when you start having a need for a lot more systems, the reason it doesn't feel like an issue right now is because you don't have enough business to make it an issue. I would challenge anybody to pay that, especially, man, I was paying $300. And if the deal canceled, I didn't pay anything. So I only paid if it closed. And I'll pay for those deals all day long. I'll pay for any lead at closing.
Yeah.
Right? I don't care. So that's been easily the transaction coordinator listing management part of it, because the listing management came second. Getting all the signs and lock boxes out of my face, that was the best.
So signs and lock boxes out of your face.
The sign
actually do that? You can actually leverage that?
Oh yeah, man. I haven't delivered. So in Texas, we have 2 checks we have to deliver in the process, right? We have the earnest money and the option check. I haven't delivered an earnest money and option check in 18 months. I haven't put a sign in the yard, taken a single measurement, put a lockbox on the door. I mean, when I take a listing, we were talking about that email that goes out earlier. I take a listing, it goes into our system. It gets all of those things start happening, like I took a listing yesterday, for instance. Tomorrow, Macy is going to go take the measurements, put the key in the lockbox, put the sign in the yard. That listing will hit the market on Wednesday. My assistant, Danny, will start sending out those automated emails the Wednesday following. I'll have one conversation with them on Monday after the first weekend. And the rest of it will be, unless they reach out or respond to some of the automation we have designed to make sure problems don't arise, I will see them at closing. And here's the thing is, I want everybody listening to this to understand. You're going to be like, I don't run my business that way. I have a more customer-oriented business than Matt Kelderman in Dallas, Texas ever does. No, you don't. I will challenge you all day long. I am the highest I you've ever met. I'm a bartender. If you are not automating this, it is strictly because you are giving yourself the excuse of thinking you need to hang on to this. I'm telling you right now, if you set this up properly and you have the proper conversations, even with past clients, I've had one situation where a past client who's done 4 transactions with me, on the 4th transaction, they came into my new systems and they were like, it kind of sucked because we didn't have you as much. But when I explained it to them, they've already sent me a referral, and that was just 3 months ago. Yeah. When you set these systems up properly and set the proper expectation, you get your whole life back.
Well, and it's like partly your clients over time start to like your system better. Like I know for me, I've always been in a system and they liked my assistant more than they did me, which got me more referrals because then they called my assistant to give a referral. And then my assistant called me to tell me I had a referral. And I was like, wow, that's amazing.
And here's the thing with that too, is like Brian has a very similar story because he's had this high level leverage in place way longer than I have. So he's able to speak to this even a little bit differently than I can. But when that also speaks to why different talent is better as well. Lady, who is now our operations director, she did all of this for us for a time. We now have some other leverage for her, so she can move into more an operation coordinator type of role, which is where she deserves to be. And
she's the man Brian.
Yes, exactly. And me and the 3 other employees we have that pester her to death, right? But we've got to get her away from the 15 agents who are just wearing her out with their nonsense, right?
Yeah.
Like, because I'm one of them. We've all got different things. We're like, can you just send this to me? I don't want to do it, right? Like, but everybody's thing is different. So it's like having 15 different, partners and trying to make all of them happy. You just don't, each person requires something different. So we've gotten her out of that role so much, but for years, dude, that's what she did. I mean, she would go out, and she's a little human. She'd be trying to put those signs in the yards in the middle of the summer in Texas when it's just baked and you can't get anything in there.
Yeah.
But having those pieces of leverage to get your time back, what we don't, I think in real estate specifically, I think entrepreneurially in general, what we don't really realize is each one of these things, you're right, it doesn't take up a lot of time. Finding that document for that client doesn't take up a lot of time. And if you even want to take it further in real estate, showing those homes to that buyer, that does take up a ton of time. That's a massive piece of leverage that I've still yet to find consistently, is that showing assistant model.
Yeah.
That is one place where I still push back hard. But as we add up all these things, it's very similar to your lead generation efforts, right? If you're cold calling, if you're running Facebook ads, if you're doing open houses, if you're, all of these lead generation tactics work a very small amount of the time. That's why really effective high leverage levels, you get all these different lead sources because you have so many more resources to push towards all these problems that now we can start taking the 4% we get from this and the 3% that this is successful and all these other lead sources, and we can push all of them and kind of grow the mountain up that way. It's the same thing if you're looking for your individual leverage. Each one of these things is only taking up small percentages of your time. But it's as you continue to push more in and continue to push more in that you realize I'm getting back hours of my day. Dude, if I'm being honest, I'm selling 45 houses a year, and that part of my business is automated.
That's awesome.
That part of my business is going to happen in t-shirts and underwear and not leaving my house. For me to get to 70, 80 transactions, that's the part where I go out and find new business and do the stuff that got me to doing the 45 in the first place. Yeah. But it was not always that way. It was a slow grind, you know?
I love it. I love it, man. So you talked about being in the Dallas market. You guys have a super interesting market because, you guys have just such a big metroplex, and, you can go take a listing an hour away and take it. And it's like weird to have to take a sign there or a lockbox. I mean, you're literally wasting so much money.
Well, there's so much time. And again, every year we do, KW, it's October, everybody does their business planning, which I never really thought of, but being partners with Brian, he's such an intellectual person. It's one of the biggest exercises in futility. Not so much because of the exercise isn't right, but it's what we talk about in there, right? It's like, we just don't give enough credence to the wear and tear on our car because it doesn't happen in that moment, right? But the reality is, I'm a good enough real estate agent. And the real estate agents who think that their niche market matters, it does. I'm not saying that you knowing the park across the street and all these other things doesn't help, but I also would challenge that I can price a house appropriately an hour away from me based off of the information I can find because I pay dues. Yeah. Right. Exactly. If it's a real niche neighborhood, I get it. Right. But if we're talking a neighborhood built after 1990, 1980, I can comp it the same way you can for the most part. Right. Exactly. So, to your point, having the ability in a metroplex like DFW where I can take business an hour away that really only requires probably, 4%, maybe 4 hours for me, like 4 hours. That includes driving to the showing, which I still do, right? COVID messes that up sometimes, but going and doing all those types of things, probably 4 hours. And that's not because I'm not a good real estate agent, right? Like there's nothing about, I have given you especially on the listing side. On the buy side, it's not the same. But on the listing side, I have given you my knowledge. We have come to a price. We have found the price. I have procured a buyer for you at the price which you decided was a good price, either through market adjustments that got us here and or I priced it appropriately at the very beginning. We got our contract fast. Either way, you've signed the contract. I have now handed that contract off to people who are much better at handling this part of it than I am. We get to the repair negotiations. Hey, here I am again. Guess what? Because I understand how to do all this part. That's why you hired me, right? After that, we have a low appraisal. Guess what? I'm jumping back in. You know why? Because I know how to talk to the other agent and do all those things, right? Some dumb didn't pay for HOA docs. All right, I'm jumping in and we're figuring all these little things. I will keep the deal together because that's where I'm a badass. Yeah. But you don't need me. You don't need to talk to me about scheduling your closing. You know why? Not my problem. I don't worry about that. Whatever time, I'll be there.
we mess it up. Like I'd mess up scheduling a closing because I'd have to call this person, and then we're gonna play phone tag because they're at wine hour, and I'm eating tacos, and I'm like, I forget, like it all get discombobulated.
If you reach out to Joan or Lady, you will hear back in an hour about it. If you reach out to me because you've broken the system, and I'm not saying it's a client's fault, you know, but I'm going to redirect you back into the system, because the reality is if you're waiting for me to reach out to the title company to schedule your closing, you're going to be waiting for a while. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to screenshot your text message. I'm going to send it to Lady and be like, Justin needs his closing set up. And then I'm going to text you back, Lady's on it. And that's going to be the extent of it, right? I'll gently redirect you into the system. But so when we talk about leverage, people need to understand that 28 months ago, I was an individual agent on paper making $190,000 selling the 3 units a month that they tell you that's all you have to sell. And I was broke and I was frustrated and my business was stagnant because I couldn't grow it from there. And again, if you don't have 2.5 years to devote to your success, then entrepreneurship isn't for you in the first place, and you're listening to the wrong podcast.
Exactly. Yep. No, I couldn't agree more. It's kind of that Rome isn't built overnight. I think a lot of people too, they're scared of, I mean, you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but I know a lot of people take a little bit of an income hit immediately when they have to go into leverage. And it's kind of like, you know, I know Tim Heil with KW used to say this all the time. It's 3 steps back to go 6 forward. And, you know, I know for a lot of people. So did you have a hurdle similar to that, or a mindset? You're like, all right, it's going to hurt for a little bit, because whether it's a team split, you know, you paying an assistant directly, I know it's usually not a positive venture for the first short little gap.
Yeah, it was all lack of ability on my part, right? Like, so first off, I define a lot of my personal value and my ability to financially provide. That's just one of my layers of brokenness in real life, right? So when funds are low, I'm not typically the person to be around anyways. I'm not really like super great at that. So I was always defensive. I was always playing defense with money instead of playing offense with money. So to broadly answer your question, yes, finances were an issue for me bringing on leverage, but it was more fear, emotion based than the actual money, because the money was there, right? Like leverage is relatively cheap. If you talk about the way that I use Danny in my business, right? Like Danny is talented, but what I'm asking him to do is not insanely difficult stuff, right? I'm asking him essentially to babysit my brain and constantly send me reminders and then not let up until those things are done, you know? So yeah, that was one of my biggest barriers, was I didn't know how it was going to immediately make me money. And because I was so uneducated about what I needed, you know, I grew up with a mom and 2 sisters, and I've always had the mentality of like, hey, can somebody just help me with this, right? And that's fine up to a point, but in entrepreneurship, there's a whole lot of problem solving you got to do on your own. And I wasn't really mentally equipped for that part of it. I just was like, hey, I'm giving you money. You should know how to solve my problems. They're like, well, dude, I don't even really know anything about your industry. And you just hired me and told me you needed help. So I'm waiting for you to tell me what you need, right? So like, it was stuff like that ultimately, I think, were the biggest barriers to me having success with it. And then the money became my excuse, right? Like I gotta let this person go because I'm not making any money off of them and I'm paying them X amount of dollars. I do think that it would be nice to have the 6 months worth of money saved up. I also think there is probably a part of your entrepreneurial journey that multiple times is going to require for you to be like, screw it, I'm rolling the dice on me. And I'm just going to see how it works. Here's what I will tell you, and I won't spend too much time on this, but I think this covers 2 important bases. It covers your training later, and it also allows you to bring awareness, because I think bringing mental awareness to some of our shortcomings is really difficult, because by nature we're all very egotistical, even if we think we're not. We just are, and we think we can do everything. So I would challenge people, if you're sitting here listening to this and you're thinking like, I might need leverage, get a free Zoom account. It's free for 45 minutes. And every time you're doing a task that you believe somebody else should be doing, record it, right? Record it, give it to your desktop and go put it on a Google Drive. And then once you get 10 or 15 videos, hire a friggin' assistant. Because you have too much stuff to be doing on your own. Because the reality is there's so much stuff, right? Whether it's just general document entry or things like that I have Danny do now, that I think like dude, if I had to enter my own pendings, like when I have a contract come in, I just forward that after it's executed, I just forward it to Danny and be like, enter this as a pending, right? Like now I get credit for selling real estate, right? And all these other systems jump off. So it's like, if you start finding yourself with a dozen of those videos, you're in need of an assistant. And I'm telling you, it doesn't matter how small those things feel to you. Um, there's a huge list of items that as entrepreneurs, we never get done. And some of those are for a reason, right? They don't need to be done. You're supposed to be an idea machine. You know, if you listen to, I listened to Dak Shepard's podcast called Armchair Expert. And he just released one with Colin Jost. He's got a bunch of really good ones, but his one with Colin Jost a couple of days ago was really good. And Colin Jost, if you listen to it long enough, gets into how he manages these other writers and how he manages these other people, telling him essentially their skits aren't good. And he's like, the reality is, I'm always thinking up ideas. I'm always thinking up things. 95% of them never make it to even the part of the process where you start going deeper and trying to turn it into a skit. As an entrepreneur, you have to realize your brain is that way. You know, your brain's a processor. It's not a storage unit. It's constantly going to be churning out information. Write that down, send it off, have some working knowledge of it. I've got so many little Google Docs of Danny that he just keeps a list of things. And I go through every once in a while and be like, no, that's still a bad idea. No, not ready for that yet. But I don't want to lose it because it inspired me at the time, right? Just all of those types of opportunities that right now you're not even calculating into your life become a viable option when you have the right pieces of leverage, right?
I love that. I love that. And so is Danny an in-person assistant for you, or
no, he's in the Philippines. No, we've got Joan, who is our team, kind of her and Lady our team backbone, along with Macy. And she's in the Philippines. Danny's her husband, and he sits next to her. So when I had the opportunity to pick up essentially Joan's husband, and she's training him. So here's the double down thing for me. I don't even have to worry about whether or not Danny gets it. And I think this is one of the things that, and by no means this is a plug for Sphere Rocket, but I think like what you guys do is you have the training built in. I kind of have that same thing. I send it to Danny, I copy Joan on it. And my last line and everything is, I'm going to assume you have this under control unless I hear back from you. That is because I'm letting you know that I officially no longer give a rip about this problem, and I'm assuming you are going to solve it unless you ask me a very specific question back. It is your problem, and conversely, your fault if it doesn't happen, because I'm washing my hands of it.
I love that. I love that.
To tell me that you're not in, right?
I love that. That's actually a really funny niche, man. We have a lot of VAs where their spouses work for the same team. Like even when we place the VA, you know, one of the best places to find a second VA is from their own family. Like
that's how we did it. I was looking for somebody. I was talking to you and whatever, and I even reached out to Joan. I said, "Who do you know?" Because she's been Brian's VA off and on for 7 years. And so she knows Brian speak. You know, and that's another part of this. I know we're winding down here. That's another part of this I want to get to is what Brian does for my business. But to be able to, when I asked her that, she's like, "Well, Danny kind of." Like we could benefit from it, and Danny could do what you need him to do, right? And he can even do more. I'm almost dumbing him down with the stupid things I'm asking him to do.
Well, and you have to, I mean, like, I don't want this to come off wrong, but like when you have the husband-wife VA team too, like you almost have like a built-in like retention. Like they're not just gonna wake up one day and go, you know what? I think we're gonna quit. Like, because they both work for you. That's the entire team. And it's like, we found high retention with that in our world is families. Like, and like you said, it's like another VA is managing another VA, and you don't have to worry about a darn thing.
No. And that's the thing is she knows how to do so much. And that's just a lucky thing that I stumbled into, but it came from making other decisions in my business. Like Brian, you know, and Brian and I's business partnership and the ability to come together. He was at a place where he was like, I'm great at selling real estate. I'm also great at systems. I don't want to sell real estate anymore. I don't want to deal with people on that level all the time. Me, on the other hand, like I said earlier, my high I personality, I want to continue dealing with people. I want to sell real estate. I want to work less to do it, right? So Brian and I joined up, and it took us, you know, anybody who's thinking about going into a 50-50 type of leadership, you give it some time, because inevitably you guys are going to be all like, hey, yeah, this is great, right? And then eventually you're going to realize like, hey, Brian's kind of in my effing lane and he won't stay in his lane. And you're not going to say anything. And then Brian's going to be like, Matt's kind of in my lane, he won't stay. And then eventually you're going to talk about your lanes, and then you're going to figure it out. And that's where it gets really awesome. Because now I'm able to go to and be like, because I'll be honest with you, I'm not I don't knock it out of the park with investors. I don't speak their language. I'm not super interested in, I like the emotional part about real estate. I like the family finding their house, you know? And for years, that business would die on the vine for me because I wouldn't turn it loose. I wouldn't refer it out. I just kind of like shy away in ignorance and eventually they'd figure it out. Now having this other thing, I can go to Brian and be like, hey man, I've got this person. I need you to build a system for this. But right now we've taken 4 or 5 of our top agents and we're taking their buyer needs and we're marketing to them with a very simple mailer. Dude, it's killing right now.
I love it.
Like it's killing. And Brian has set up all of this automation. We have text message automation and Google AdWords automation. And Brian and I have recruiting automation. I have referral automation that's going to start in October, that we're building all these systems out through part of what you showed me with LinkedIn and some things that I put into effort there. Dude, I've gotten over 600 contacts organically from that. From like legitimately asking for it in conversation. It's a nightmare. I've got hundreds of messages all the time.
Yeah.
But like, it's for me in the way my lead generation sources are where I'm trying to build my business to, man, it's too perfect. And all of that automation, I can dump some of that in Brian's lap and say, hey, how would you relay this to Joan so she can relay it to Danny? And it gets me even further out of the process.
I love it.
Now all I'm doing is responding to people when they raise their hand, which is what I want.
I love that. So where did you say you had hundreds of messages from?
That or the LinkedIn automation, right?
I haven't even followed up with you. I know I gave you access like 3 or 4 months ago, but I didn't even realize that you were using it.
So perfect example about that, right? Here's how I'm using automation in that every single month.
Yeah.
So I'm using that LinkedIn automation. So I have a large agent referral business. And so every single month, Danny, my assistant, I got it today, sends me an email that says, add 5 more cities to Ulink.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So I get that. I go into Ulink. I already have my automation set up that you turned me on to. I wrote a 7-message automation for that because I'm only doing connection campaign right now, right?
Yep. Yep.
So I wrote a 7-message automation for that. Now that I've got all my core cities in, I've already ran through all my core cities. Now I'm just adding places, right? Like last month, I added Keller Williams International places. I added Spain, some other places, because there's not a ton. Yeah. And I let that automation run to them all month long because that automation fills itself out in 1 month, right?
And I guarantee you, man, in Spain, there's not a lot of Dallas agents hitting them up. Even this in daily year.
And I'm using it to push my agent business. I'm using it to push the podcast. I'm using it to push Tour Academy. I'm using it just to ask them how their business is going. I've even got one in there that asks them what lead generation methods they've been killing it with lately, right? Like it doesn't look like, dude, I've sent that to people in areas that I know people and they get the one that's like, hey, they get like the 3rd one where I finally start asking if they have a DFW referral partner. They're like, yeah, I thought it was you. And I'm like, oh no, this is automation, man.
Sorry, man.
All of that. And then here's what happens. Once I get their phone number, I screenshot it. I email it to Danny and I title it LinkedIn. He knows that it goes into my Boomtown. Yep. He has to go and search for their office address. They get put into send out cards. They get a thank you welcome card. They now go into our MailChimp thing and our text message thing that when it's built out in October, because I wanted to have 1,000 names in it before I started sending it out, we'll start sending them the automation that we've built around this, quarterly things about my referral business and send out cards. And dude, I mean, because the send out cards is another piece of automation. I'm trying to break that, right? Like I want to send out so many cards. Right now I'm sending out 25 a week, right? So I'm more than getting, right now I'm essentially getting my cards. They're a little bit expensive, but the team is using it also for birthday cards and anniversary cards and other stuff. Just me personally, I'm trying to send out 25 a week.
Damn, are you using their unlimited package?
Yeah, that $97 a month package, dude.
That's insane. Like, even if you send 100 cards a week yourself and each card costs $3, like you're like 1/3 of what the actual, it's like $1 a card.
It's so easy, man. I mean, I will tell you, we haven't even revved this up, the automation side on that yet, but I already have Danny. He's went through my Boomtown. That's the CRM we use. And he's tagged all of my sellers who have confirmed addresses. He's put a tag on them that says send out card seller. And we're going to start hitting them with send out cards every single month as well.
That's crazy. That is crazy.
You know what I mean? And dude, here's the thing is none of that. Not only would that same $1,500 a month I was spending in realtor.com at the end of September of 2016 when I finally canceled it because I was legit paying $100 a lead, and I was like, this is horseshit. Like that exact same amount of money has purchased me so much individual leverage. And then by having a business partner and running a business that's legitimately going to close 50 to 60 million this year, now we have a business budget that allows us to have employees and, like Nick Good, our buddy, he's got salaries and all these other things. I look at Brian, I'm like, dude, we're running a business right now that like has $250,000 a year in expenses.
Yeah.
Like never in a million years would I thought we'd have $250,000 a year going out. Like not in a million years. It still sounds nuts to think about.
And you're not like totally responsible for it either.
No, and it happens. Every month bills are paid and we make a profit. And I'm like, dude, we have a real business. It still feels nuts, man.
I love that, man. Well, hey, I really appreciate you coming on today, man. It's not every day we get to talk to one of the top expansionist partners in the country with you guys. So for people listening today, if they got referrals for the Dallas area, what areas do you kind of serve? What's the best way they can get a hold of you?
The best referrals to send to me are Dallas proper, the immediate surroundings, right? If you want all of my knowledge and all of my expertise, I'm an East Dallas condo, uptown, downtown. That's where I cut my teeth and know more about than anything else. So if you've got clients like that, definitely reach out to me. Super easy to find me. You can Google my name. We'll put a little lower third in here or something, but yeah.
Yeah, we'll have it somewhere. My virtual assistant's gonna put it probably like above your face the entire
time. It's super easy to find me. I'm the most public forward-facing person. If you want to see how I really live my life, you can go check me out. My Facebook is totally public. There's not a whole lot. It's pretty easy to find me.
I love it, man. Well, I appreciate you being on here. As always, guys, signing off with the Real Leverage Podcast. Whether you need podcasts yesterday, today, or tomorrow, we're always here for your questions. Matt, I really appreciate you being on, man.
Thanks, kid. I appreciate being on, man.
Yep. Thank you.